Such a pretty song. Part two of the song we started hearing yesterday, Anim Zemirot by Rabbi Josh Warshawski. How's everybody doing? We're in the midst of just an elevated section of the Talmud, that's for sure. Talking about the mystical secrets of the Torah, of the universe, what can be taught, what cannot be taught, and the sages say a lot about what cannot be taught. We're going to continue that today. The story that I've often mentioned about the four who entered Pardes, the four who entered, Gan Eden, and only one came back unscathed. That's on tomorrow's daf, actually, Chagigah 14. Tomorrow will be a key daf for that reason. But the prelude to that could be another key daf. We're not going to just do so many key dafs in a row, but amazing material today. Amazing. Let's light up the darkness. Who is with us as we delve into the secrets here on Chagigah 13? James in Indianapolis, Nancy in North Carolina, Renee in Indiana, Karen in Northern California, Girl Rocket Moonchild in Tennessee. Wow, what a great name. Bella in Florida, Yehudit in South Carolina, Melissa in Great Neck, Sharon in Lebanon, New Jersey, Leon in Maryland, Paul in Chicago, John in Maine, Lucy in Minnesota, Valsa says 2 people in the house. Tom may be distracted trying to follow news from Ukraine. May we hear good news. I think the whole world is very tense. Shalom. May we have peace. May we have peace. Caroline in Raleigh. Aaron wishing us a good evening. Bill in mid-Missouri also praying for peace. Stephen in New Hampshire. Yosef in Massachusetts. Paula, the great Northwest, loves that song too. Barry's in Indiana. Tom, my background is Russian history, so I'm especially concerned. Yeah, really, we are praying for good news out of that area. I mean, I'm scheduled to go to Ukraine later this year. I want to get back to Uman for Rosh Hashanah. It's a more peaceful part of Ukraine. And, even when there's been hostilities in the past, that celebration, Rosh Hashanah in Uman, has gone forward. COVID stopped that. Now it's time to go back, I hope. But, there's plenty of time before Rosh Hashanah. So hopefully things will be settled even before Passover, even before Purim. Wouldn't that be good? All right. Today's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by my friend Elliot Berg in honor of his dad, Tanny Berg. His Hebrew name, Natanel Shimon ben Yaakov Eliyahu. He does so many mitzvahs to help others without any recognition and is a true role model for our family. What a beautiful tribute to your dad, Elliot. May he continue to be a role model to your whole family and his whole community to 120 and be strong at 120 like Moses was. And may you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings, Elliot. We say amen. Thank you for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. All right. What a daf. What a daf. Okay, let's get into it. Today's page is 13, Chagigah 13. We're continuing our discussion of Mishna number 1 in chapter 2. This tractate is about the laws of the festival offering. What are the laws of the offering? Which offering? How do we bring it? Etc. And somehow we're in this extended digression about the hidden secrets, hidden mysteries of Torah, of Scripture, of the tradition, and we're keeping it going. That's the beauty of the Talmud. We picked this up near the bottom of 12b. The souls of the righteous are found in heaven. Yesterday at the end, we were talking about the various levels of heaven as sort of suggested in the Maaseh Bereshis, right? The account, the act of creation. The Torah, right, in the book of Genesis at the beginning, it says, sort of step by step what God did to create the world. But you can imagine, I mean, if you look at the difference between, a quick summarized newspaper article about the construction of a skyscraper, for example, versus the blueprints and manuals and technical and bids and contractor documents, etc. There's a lot of detail that goes into building merely a skyscraper. If you're now going to set out to create the universe, all of that cannot quite be captured in a few verses at the beginning of Genesis. This is a subject that the sages said cannot be taught publicly or even to more than one student at a time, because there's many hidden facets of the creation, which is just not for everybody's understanding. And one aspect of that was the various levels of Shamayam, of heaven. So the souls of the righteous are found in heaven, as it is written, from 1 Samuel 25:29, and the soul of my master shall be bound in the bundle of life with the Lord your God. Spirits and souls that are to be created are found there, as it is written, for the spirit that enwraps itself is from me, and the souls that I have made. Isaiah 57:16. And this indicates that the spirit to be released into the world, wrapped around a body, is located close to God. So this is the source for the idea that a soul isn't just created at the moment of conception, within a mom here on earth. Rather, that soul already existed, who knows for how long. This is even if it's a new soul, right? Reincarnated souls, and we believe in reincarnation, that some souls return. There's part of their mission that still needs to be fulfilled, and they'll live another lifetime. But even a soul that's going to inhabit a human life for the first time, that soul pre-existed its human vehicle, as it were, and who knows by how many eons, right? So we are souls. We come from a place of eternity. We live an incandescent life here. It's so short alongside eternity. And then we return to the world of souls, God willing. And the dew that the Holy One, blessed be He, will use to revive the dead at the time of the resurrection of the dead when Mashiach comes, the Messiah, the dew that will be used to revive the dead is found in heaven, as it is written, Psalm 68:10, a bountiful rain you will pour down, God. When your inheritance was weary, you confirmed it. And there in the firmaments are the Ophanim and the Seraphim, the holy divine creatures and the ministering angels and the throne of glory. And the King, God, the living, lofty, exalted one, dwells above them in Aravot, Hebrew word Aravot. As it is stated, extol him who rides upon the skies. Aravot there translated as skies. Whose name is God, Psalm 68:5. And from where do we derive that Aravot, sky, plural, skies, is called heaven? It has the same word, has the same meaning as Shamayam, or an aspect of Shamayam. This is learned by using a verbal analogy between two instances of rides and rides. Here it is written, extol him who rides upon the skies, right, talking about God. And there in Deuteronomy 33:26, it is written, who rides upon the heaven as your help. and darkness and clouds and fog surround him. As it is stated, he made darkness his hiding place, his pavilion round about him, the darkness of waters, thick clouds of the skies. Psalm 18, verse 12. And the Gemara asks, and is there darkness before heaven? In other words, in front of God, around God, in the place of God, is there darkness? But isn't it written, Daniel 2:22, he reveals deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him, demonstrating that only light and not darkness is found in the place of God. And the Gemara answers, La Kasha, this is not difficult. This verse, which states that only light dwells with him, is referring to the inner houses, where there is only light. And that source, according to which he is surrounded by darkness, is referring to the outer houses. And Rav Acha Bar Yaakov said there is one more firmament above these, which is above the heads of the divine creatures, as it is written, and over the heads of the divine creatures there was the likeness of a firmament, like the color of the terrible ice. And now we start getting into Ezekiel. Ezekiel 1:22. So, one of the reasons why the sages were so hesitant to teach this material, what are we talking about? This idea of mysticism, of having some kind of curiosity, exploration, investigation of the upper realms. And that doesn't mean up, like leaving the Earth's surface and going into space, but ascending to higher levels of the spiritual reality that we inhabit, sort of closer to the heavenly throne. The divine chariot sort of is the place that God occupies, and it's a chariot, not a throne sometimes, because God is always in motion. God can go anywhere. God is everything. All of this is metaphor, right? We can't, even what is hinted at in the Bible when we're talking about those upper realms is beyond human understanding. So anything we say about it, if you're thinking that, these words or descriptions of various levels has captured the reality of it, so right away you get into heresy, right? Because it can't capture all of that. It's heretical, it's arrogant, it's insulting to the honor of God to sort of try to capture that in words or even in human thoughts. So why don't we just leave the whole topic aside? Well, it is mentioned in the Bible. Ezekiel is going to expound quite a bit about the nature of that upper realm. He's going to describe what he saw, what he experienced, whether he saw it with his eyes or his inner eye. It was real, and he had some kind of an opportunity to witness a bit of what goes on in those realms, and he reported back on it to his audience, as it were, the audience of Israel that he was prophesying to, right? It was his job as a prophet to speak. And as we'll learn today, Isaiah saw what Ezekiel saw, but in Isaiah's prophecy, he focused on, God's judgment of us and how we need to elevate our behavior as a result of our, the precarious place that the sins of the Jewish people had brought them to in their relationship with God. And Isaiah didn't feel the need to report on what his experience was like while he was prophesying. Ezekiel did. Why did Ezekiel report on the experience of prophecy and Isaiah didn't? We'll talk about that momentarily. It's also taught elsewhere. I don't know if it's going to be on these pages. That even the lowliest handmaid, right? Like a very inexperienced, uneducated, youngster who was crossing the Sea of Reeds when we left Egypt, had a prophetic experience even beyond what Isaiah and Ezekiel experienced. It wasn't just that the waters parted of the ocean. It was that the people, were within prophecy. They were having an absolutely mystical, sort of like an out-of-body experience as they crossed the sea. They had literally prophetic experience. Everybody did, right? It was amazing. And at Mount Sinai, It wasn't just that the mountain was quaking and roaring, right? And, and then from time to time, individuals who even aren't prophets have some kind of a glimpse into that upper world, whether it's near-death experience, shared death experience, trance experience, various vehicles that get us, out of this world and to get a glimpse of those upper worlds, right? And if you've ever had that kind of an experience, to describe it when you return from it, impossible. You try to summon some hint of what it was like, and that's maybe what we're talking about when we say we want to bring fire back from the mountain, right? But to really capture it, impossible. And so when the sages are talking about that you can only talk about these matters, one sage to another sage or a near sage who already has the wisdom and most of the knowledge already somehow came upon it, and that's who's sort of qualified to talk about this stuff, and it cannot be taught publicly, and it cannot be taught to two people at a time, and it cannot be taught to people that are not ready for it, because it becomes dangerous. So I will continue to read here, but just want to give some perspective of where we're coming from here. All right, so the Gemara comments, until here, now we're talking about the book of Ezekiel, until here you have permission to speak. From this point forward, you do not have permission to speak. As it is written in the book of Ben Sira. Now, Ben Sira was a sort of later book that some sought to include in the Bible. It was not canonized into the Hebrew Bible, but it was a highly respected book that the sages would teach and learn from. So in the book of Ben Sira, it said, seek not things concealed from you, nor search those hidden from you. Reflect on that which is permitted to you, and you have no business with secret matters. It is taught in a bereshis that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, what response did the divine voice, the Bas Kol, right, the voice of heaven, provide to that wicked man, Nebuchadnezzar, when he said, Isaiah 14:14, Nebuchadnezzar, the one who ended up conquering Jerusalem, destroying the first temple, he said, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. That's a recipe for just self-destruction, that's for sure. I'm reminded of the Shelley poem, Ozymandias, right? Look upon ye mighty in despair, right? And Ozymandias disappeared into the sands of time. What happened in Nebuchadnezzar? A divine voice came and said to him, wicked man, son of a wicked man, descendant, i.e. follower of the ways of Nimrod, the wicked, who caused the entire world to rebel against him during the time of his reign. How many are the years of man? 70 years, as it is stated. The span of our life is 70 years, or if we are strong, 80 years. That's Psalm 90. Now, is there not from the earth to the firmament a walking distance of 500 years? And the thickness of the firmament itself is a walking distance of 500 years. And a similar distance exists between each and every one of the firmaments. Isn't that amazing that they were talking about distance, a distance of, how big a distance? It would take 500 years to walk it. It's a spectacular thing to think about, right? They didn't know from light years back then, this idea that you would measure distance by how fast light travels. They didn't have cars. They had, wagons, right? They had horses. They had sailboats. That's about maybe as fast as they would ever get going. But basically, people walked everywhere. And now imagine a distance of how far you would walk in 500 years. I mean, listen, in 500 years, you could walk around the earth several times. They were talking about massive distances, and they measured them in this way. And above them all, above all the firmaments, are the divine creatures. Right? These are the realm of the angels. And the feet of the divine creatures correspond in distance to all the firmaments, and the ankles of the animals correspond to all of them. The shins of the animal correspond to all of them. The knees of the animals correspond to all of them. The thighs of the animals correspond to all of them. These are metaphors. This is meant to be understood as a kind of a sequence for the unimaginable, scale of the angels. They might manifest themselves in this world, in the shape of a person, but they are spiritual creatures, whose perspective and spiritual powers, fills solar systems, galaxies, who knows? And the heads of the animals correspond to all of them, and the horns of the animals correspond to all of the heavenly creatures. And above them is the throne of glory. The feet of the throne of glory correspond to all of them. The throne of glory corresponds to all of them. And the living, almighty, lofty, exalted King dwells above them. All of this was to establish just how unimaginably lofty is the presence of the Lord. And you, Nebuchadnezzar, say, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. And the next verse states, yet you shall be brought down to the netherworld, to the uttermost parts of the pit. Right? That arrogance of Nebuchadnezzar, no, he didn't make it to the highest levels and alongside the Most High. In fact, he didn't get to heaven at all in his evil ways. He ended up in a pit. It is taught in the Mishnah, according to the Gemara's explanation, nor may one expound the design of the divine chariot to even one individual. Okay, so now we're getting into Ma'aseh Merkava. Right, this is the home address here in the Talmud of ancient Jewish mysticism. This refers to the Merkava as a chariot, and we're referring specifically to the vision of Ezekiel when he describes witnessing the divine chariot and what that could mean. Rabbi Chia taught, but one may transmit to him, right? You cannot teach an individual who doesn't know anything about the secrets of the divine chariot. But one may transmit to him the outlines of this topic, leaving him to comprehend the rest on his own. Rabbi Zera said, one may transmit the outlines of the design of the divine chariot only to the president of the court, who needs to know them due to his wisdom and meritorious deeds, and to anyone whose heart inside him is concerned, i.e., one who is concerned about his sins and desires to achieve full repentance. And there are those who say that this does not refer to two separate individuals, but to the president of the court, whose heart inside him is concerned. Right? And it's very interesting that we're already talking about that one who would learn about the secrets of Jewish mysticism must also be concerned about his sins, or perhaps is pursuing this knowledge because he's trying to make an atonement. We're not teaching the subject. We're just, sort of gently stepping around the subject to see what can be hinted at. But this idea that one of the reasons a person can become in danger, this idea you're not worthy, we're not worthy to learn these kinds of secrets, but really it's somebody who is, kind of emotionally not whole, a person who's carrying a kind of lifestyle which is not conducive to this kind of investigation, really should not be pursuing it. You don't, explore Jewish mysticism just because you're curious about the upper realms. It's really because you're trying to become a whole and wholesome being. Rabbi Ami said the secrets of the Torah may be transmitted only to one who possesses the following 5 characteristics. The captain of 50, one who is worthy to be a captain of 50. The man of favor, and the counselor, and the cunning charmer, and the skillful enchanter. That's on Isaiah 3:3. And Rabbi Ami further said, the words of Torah may not be, and this is the secrets of Torah, may not be transmitted to a Gentile. As it is stated, he has not dealt so with any nation, and as for his ordinances, they have not known them. Psalm 147:20. Rav Steinsaltz comments on this. Is it true that the words of Torah may not be transmitted to a non-Jew? Several commentaries are puzzled by the fact that the law with regard to transmitting words of Torah to a Gentile is not cited by the halachic decisors. They don't say that you're not allowed to teach Torah to non-Jews. The Sfas Emes writes that once the Torah was translated into Greek, it was no longer possible to issue a blanket prohibition in this regard. Others claim that the statement with regard to transmitting the words of Torah to a Gentile does not refer to the words of the Torah themselves, but only to the secrets of Torah. And the Meiri follows his consistent approach and maintains that this prohibition applies only to Gentiles who actually worship idols, but not to those who believe in one God. Now the Gemara relates, Rabbi Yochanan said to Rabbi Elazar, "Come and I will teach you the design of the divine chariot." And Rabbi Elazar said to him, "I have not yet aged sufficiently." Now, this is Rabbi Elazar, who, when he was 18, was made the Nasi, right, replacing Rabban Gamliel. So, to say he wasn't prepared, they thought he was prepared to be the Nasi when he was 18. This is later, and he says, no, I haven't aged sufficiently. This is where we get these sources about the idea that a man should not be studying this kind of stuff until he's 40. What's the magic about being 40? It's more this idea that he has settled in his skin. He doesn't have the young stress of the young buck, as it were. So he said, I have not yet aged sufficiently, as one must be very settled in one's mind for these studies. When he grew old, Rabbi Yochanan had already passed away. And Rabbi Asi said to him, "Come and I will teach you the design of the divine chariot." And Rabbi Elazar said to him, "Had I merited, I would have learned it from Rabbi Yochanan, your teacher. It therefore appears that I am unworthy of studying it." And he backed away from it. Right? We also saw in that story Rabbah and Rav Zera. Right? Rabbah was well versed in these kinds of secrets and used the intoxication of Purim to help him access kind of those upper worlds. And he brought Rabbi Zera with him, and it went bad. And then the next year, Rabbah said to Rav Zera, "Come, let's celebrate the Purim together." And Rabbi Zera said, "Yeah, it's not for me. That's for you. For me, it's not." And these are great, great sages, right? So we shouldn't feel like we're missing out on something. It may just not be for us. The Gemara relates, Rav Yosef would study the design of the divine chariot and was familiar with the subject, whereas the elders of Pumbedisa would study the act of creation, right, a different area of mysticism. And they said to Rav Yosef, "Let the master teach us the design of the divine chariot." And he said to them, "Well, you teach me the act of creation." After they taught him the subject, they said to him, "Now let the master teach us the design of the divine chariot." He said to them, "We learned with regard to them these particular secrets of the Torah from Song of Songs 4:11, honey and milk are under your tongue, meaning that matters that are sweeter than honey and milk should remain under your tongue. In other words, one should not speak of such matters, and anyone who is familiar with them may not reveal them to others." These elders of Pumbedisa, they're elders, they're well-versed in the act of creation. They really were not worthy. It would have been dangerous for them to learn Maseh Merkava, this divine chariot mysticism. And so Rav Yosef said, "Yeah, not for you, and I'm not going to share it with you." Rabbi Abahu said it is derived from here, and maybe he realized that they weren't worthy after learning from them what they were teaching him about the acts of creation. He spent some time learning with them, and although he said, "You teach me that, and then I'll teach you the other," but he realized it would have been dangerous to teach them that. So it might have pained them at that time to be deprived of this knowledge that they thought they were going to receive, but it was for their own good. Rabbi Abahu said, it is derived from here, from the following verse. The lambs, kevasim, will be for your clothing. That's Proverbs 27:26. And Rabbi Bahu expounds as though it were written with a shin, kevashim, meaning concealed matters. Things that constitute the concealed matters of the world should be under your clothing. You should not reveal them. If they're hidden in this world, there's a reason for them to be hidden. And while there may be a kind of group of people who find their way there, it's almost like, remember Close Encounters of the Third Kind? It was like certain people were called to that place and they couldn't be kept away. It was for them to, have that experience and to discuss among themselves. But it's not something to broadcast to people who aren't called to it, as it were. So when the elders of Pumbedisa saw that Rav Yosef was not going to teach them, they said to him, well, we have learned them, the verses concerning the design of the divine chariot that are written in the book of Ezekiel, up to the verse from Ezekiel chapter 2, verse 1, and he said to me, son of man, meaning it's really the bulk of that mysticism is chapter 1 of Ezekiel. He said, well, we studied chapter 1 of Ezekiel. And Rav Yosef said to them, well, if so, these verses are the very essence of the design of the divine chariot, as they provide the main details of the topic. What do you need to learn it from me for? You studied it. And the Gemara raises an objection to this from a beraisa. Until where is the design of the divine chariot related? Is it all of chapter 1 of the book of Ezekiel? Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rebbe, the editor of the Mishna, says until the second and I saw in Ezekiel 1:27, and not including the last verse of that verse of the chapter. And Rabbi Yitzchak says until the word hahashmal, okay, which is translated here as the electrum, until the word the electrum in Ezekiel 1:27. That's where the design of the divine chariot ends. Now, neither of these opinions accord with Rav Yosef's opinion that the design of the divine chariot continues until the end of chapter 1. So the Gemara answers, until and I saw, we teach those worthy of it. And from this point forward, we transmit only the outlines. And there are those who say, until and I saw, we transmit the outlines. And from this point forward, if a person is wise and can understand of his own accord, yes, we teach him. And if not, we do not teach him even the outlines. And the Gemara poses a question. And may one teach about the electrum, right, the chashmal of the divine chariot at all? But wasn't there a certain young man, a youth, who expounded the electrum, the chashmal, referred to by Ezekiel, and fire came out and consumed him, showing that such study is highly dangerous? And the Gemara answers, well, that youth was different, for his time to study such matters had not yet arrived. Therefore, he was punished. He was too young and inexperienced, his mind too unsettled to delve into such topics as the chashmal. What is the chashmal? What is the electrum? Hold on to your seat. Rav Yehuda said, indeed, that man is remembered for good, and Hananiah ben Chizkiah was his name, not the young man who perished. Why are we now mentioning Hananiah ben Chizkiah? Because were it not for him, the book of Ezekiel would have been suppressed. It would not have been included in Tanakh. It would not have been included in the Hebrew Bible. Why did the sages, or the leaders, the elders, the leaders of the generation at the time that they were canonizing the Bible, why did they seek to suppress the book of Ezekiel? Because they found that its words contradicted the words of Torah. What? Because the later chapters of Ezekiel contain many laws that appear as if they're not in accord with the laws of the Torah. When he's talking about the third temple, and how sacrifices are to be brought in the temple that he saw in his vision, it seems a little different than the laws of the sacrifices that we learn in the Torah. And the laws of the sacrifices in the Torah are eternal. They're for all time. So that when the temple comes back, we will follow the laws of the Torah. So if something is a little different in the later chapters of Ezekiel, maybe the prophet like, did he make a mistake? Did he render it wrong? It must be true. It must be that there's no contradiction. It just needs to be reconciled. But it might lead the average person to say there's contradictions within the Bible. It must be there's something wrong with the Bible. And for that reason, they sought to suppress the book of Ezekiel. Hananiah ben Chizkiah said to them, wait a minute, where am I? And so they sought, where am I? Right. Were it not for Hananiah ben Chizkiah, the book of Ezekiel would have been suppressed. Why? Because it has words that contradict the words of Torah in its later chapters about the sacrifices. So what did Hananiah ben Chizkiah do? They brought up to him 300 barrels of oil for light and sustenance, and he sat in an upper chamber, and he expounded it to reconcile its teachings with those of the Torah. Right? All these apparent contradictions which would lead people to error, he just figured it all out. He slowly, carefully, methodically examined every law and every apparent contradiction and showed how there's no contradiction. You just need to understand it properly. And the sages taught an incident occurred involving a youth who was reading the book of Ezekiel in the house of his teacher. And he was able to comprehend the chashmal, the electrum. And fire came out of the electrum and burned him. And they sought to suppress the book of Ezekiel due to the danger that it posed. Right? So this is a second reason that they sought to suppress Ezekiel. Not because it contained laws that seemed to contradict the Torah, but because its mystical subject matter, especially in that first chapter, led to this young man like dying, right? In his kind of mystical exploration through his study of the book of Ezekiel, a fire emerged from the chashmal, from this area of the upper realm, kind of like a fire emerged and he was taken, much as the sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, were taken, right, by a divine kiss, that a fire emerged, right, and took their souls. Their bodies were intact, but their souls were gone. It must have been something like that. Or perhaps he was literally burned. At any rate, this young man studying the book of Ezekiel, the mystical secrets therein, was killed. And so they sought to suppress the book of Ezekiel due to the danger that it posed. And Hananiah ben Chizkiah said to them, well, if this youth happened to be wise, are all people wise enough to understand this book? Most people will read Ezekiel, right? 99.9999999% of the people, they'll just find it interesting, confusing, colorful. No fire is going to emerge from heaven to take them because they won't like get inside those verses and start to be transported to a place that is prohibited. And the Gemara asks, what is the chashmal? What is this thing we're translating into English as the electrum? What is it? Rav Yehuda said it refers to speaking animals of fire. Electrum, chashmal, is an acrostic of this phrase, chayot esh memalalot. Right? The animals, chayot esh, of fire, that speak, memalalot. And it was taught in a baraisa, at times they are silent and at times they speak. When the divine speech emerges from the mouth of the Holy One, blessed be He, these creatures, these forces, these beings of the electrum are silent. But when the divine speech does not emerge from the mouth of the Holy One, when God is not speaking, then they speak. And the verse states, and the divine creatures ran and returned like the appearance of a flash of lightning, bazak. This is Ezekiel 1:14. What is the meaning of ran and return? Now, it's just we don't have time today. This would be a little bit more familiar if you just read Ezekiel chapter 1. But, I'm sure you've all read it before, and you might recall, it's like, first of all, he's not in Israel, right? Ezekiel is having that prophecy after the destruction of Jerusalem in the first temple, and he's in Babylonia as part of the Babylonian exile. Rare, right? Rare for a prophet to experience prophecy outside of the Holy Land. And he's just, and he sees this whole thing, right? And it says the these angels with the four faces that are ever turning and changing, the wheels that are turning, this image of the chariot and the lightning and the flash and the fire. So, we're looking at some specific verses from that general description that Ezekiel brings back of what he saw when prophecy came upon him. So, where was I? And the divine creatures ran and returned like the appearance of a flash of lightning, bazak. What is the meaning of ran and returned? And Rav Yehuda said, like fire that is emitted from a furnace, whose flame is continuously bursting out and withdrawing. I mean, like, they didn't have the imagery that we have. This is like, you can imagine kind of slow motion, a big fiery explosion in a movie where like the fire and cloud is kind of continuously emerging, coming out like this, like a massive torch, like a gas explosion that keeps emerging. Kind of can help us understand this image a little bit. Like fire that is emitted from a furnace whose flame is continuously bursting out and withdrawing. What is the meaning of like the appearance of a flash of lightning? And Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina said, like the fire that is emitted from between pieces of earthenware used for refining gold. As an additional meaning ascribed to the word bazak is shards of earthenware. And the verse states, and I looked, and we're on the B side, by the way, of 13. And the verse states, and I looked, and behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, a great cloud with a fire flashing up, so that a brightness was around about it, and out of its midst was like the color of electrum, the chashmal, out of the midst of the fire. And the Gemara poses a question. That was Ezekiel 1:4. The Gemara poses a question, where did that wind go? Rav Yehuda said that Rav said, it went to conquer the entire world under the wicked Nebuchadnezzar. And why was all of this necessary? Why was it necessary that the entire world should be subjected to the dominion of Nebuchadnezzar? So that the nations of the world would not say, the Holy One, blessed be He, delivered His children into the hands of a lowly nation. Right? We didn't merit to keep the first temple in our midst because of our sins. We descended, we were destroyed, we lost that temple. But who was the instrument of that destruction? Nebuchadnezzar. Was he some lowly, neighboring king from a little banana republic? No, it was the great mighty Nebuchadnezzar. That's for the honor of God's children, as it were, even in the midst of their destruction, even in the midst of our punishment. Since it was already decreed that the kingdom of Israel would fall into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, God made him into a great conqueror so that Israel would not be ashamed of being defeated by him. And the Holy One, blessed be He, said with regard to this, who caused me to be an attendant to worshipers of molten images, forcing me to wage their wars? It was the sins of Israel that led me to do so. It was icky for God to help Nebuchadnezzar become a great and conquering king. But it was necessary for the story to play out as it did. Another verse in the same chapter states, Ezekiel 1:15, now, as I beheld the divine creatures, behold, one wheel, Ophan, was upon the earth near the divine creatures. And Rabbi Elazar said the wheel is a certain angel who stands on the earth, and its head reaches the divine creatures. And it was taught in a bereshis, this angel is named Sandalphon, who is taller than his colleague by a distance of 500 years. And he stands behind the divine chariot, and he weaves crowns for his maker, for God. And the Gemara asks, is that so? Can crowns be woven for God? But isn't it written, Ezekiel 3:12, blessed be the Lord's glory from His place. Right? Baruch kavod Hashem mimkomo. Right? So we say that, we recite that in our prayers every day. But isn't it written, blessed be the Lord's glory from His place, which proves by inference that no one knows His place. Therefore, how can crowns be woven for Him? Rather, it can be done by saying a name for the crown, and then the crown goes and sits on God's head of its own accord. Rava said, all that Ezekiel saw, the prophet Isaiah saw also. But Isaiah did not find it necessary to describe his vision in such detail. Why? To what may Ezekiel be compared? To a villager who saw the king, and he's excited by all the extravagances of the king's palace and everything it contains, as he is unaccustomed to them. And to what may Isaiah be compared? To a city dweller who saw the king. Such an individual focuses on the encounter with the king and is oblivious to all the distractions. Right? Remember, the purpose of prophecy is for the prophet to receive a communication from God, which he's then going to turn around and transmit to the people. The message, right? Repent, stop sinning, come back to Torah, live up to your obligations as a Jew, etc. That's the prophet's job. Reporting on, what it was like to be in the presence of the king is actually a little bit outside the purpose of the prophecy. So Isaiah, who seems to be accustomed to being in the presence of the king, either because he experienced prophecy more often or from a younger age, or because Isaiah himself was a city dweller and Ezekiel was a village dweller, right? Isaiah saw the grandeur of the temple and of Jerusalem and the palaces of kings. He was a noble-born. Ezekiel was a man of the people. So for him to see, this incredible stuff was so unusual for him that he thought that it would help him in transmitting his message to report back on what it was like to receive the message from God. And still another interpretation of this is that Ezekiel was talking to people who needed to hear that part of the message, and Isaiah was talking to different people who didn't need that in order to receive, what they needed to get from the communication in the prophecy. Reish Lakish said, "What is the meaning of that which is written? I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted." Exodus 15:1. It is fitting to sing to he who is exalted above the exalted. As the master said, the king of the beasts is the lion. The king of the domestic animals is the ox. The king of the birds is the eagle. And man is exalted and lords over them all. But the Holy One, blessed be he, is exalted above all of them and above the entire world. As the creatures that appear in the divine chariot are the ox, the lion, the eagle, and the man, the human. Right? So why were these four, why do they appear as the faces of the angels, the ever-shifting faces of the angels in Ezekiel's vision? It seems like the attendants of the Lord have the faces or, the attributes of already the most powerful, most intelligent, most authoritative creatures in this world, to suggest that, the highest among us is just fit to be a servant in the court of God, even a servant to the servants, to the servants, to the servants, but at any rate. And the Gemara poses a question with regard to the animals of the divine chariot. So one verse states, Ezekiel 1:10, as for the likeness of their faces, right, these angelic beings who attend the chariot of God, as for the likenesses of their faces, they had the face of a man, and the four had the face of a lion on the right side, and the four had the face of an ox on the left side. And it is also written, Ezekiel 10:14, and each one had four faces. The first face was the face of the cherub, a Kuruv. That's a type of warrior angel. Cherub has come to mean a baby-faced angel. How did that happen? Today we're going to find out. And each had four faces. The first face was that of the cherub, or the Kuruv in Hebrew. And the second face was the face of a man. And the third was the face of a lion. And the fourth was the face of an eagle. But it does not include the face of an ox in this second description of those angelic beings that attend to the Lord. And Reish Lakish said, Ezekiel requested mercy with regard to it. In other words, the face of the ox. Like Ezekiel was shown this, and then he said, could we make a change in the faces of the angels that attend to you, God? Could we swap out the face of the ox for the face of a human? Why would Ezekiel say that? Because of the incident of the golden calf. right? Anything having to do with cows is sort of like reminding God of the ultimate sin that we as a people committed at Mount Sinai while Moses was up receiving the Torah, and we strayed so quickly and built that golden calf. So when we're beseeching mercy, when we're in trouble in this world, the last thing we want to do is remind God of an ox, right? So Ezekiel requested mercy with regard to it and had it turned into a cherub, right? A Kuruv in English, in Hebrew. And he said before God as follows, Master of the universe, shall an accuser, kategor, become a defender, sanegor, right? He's like the angels here are sort of helping the humans get back on track. So they're defenders for us. But what we don't want is to remind God of how much we strayed by summoning the image of the ox. So the Gemara asked, what is the meaning of Kuruv? In English, cherub. Right, it's the same word, right? Like it sounds so different, but cherub, it's that CH, it's like charuv, right? And it's the cha and the ka in Hebrew, it's really the same letter. So this cherub really comes from the Hebrew word kuruv. And in the angels that are on top of the ark, right, where the tablets of the Ten Commandments are carried in the ark, right? They're like Raiders of the Lost Ark. The ark has two angels on top of it, and those are keruvim. And the other place we find this word is the warrior angels with the fiery swords who stand guard outside of the Garden of Eden after Adam and Eve were thrown out and were not permitted to return. Who's the doorman? The warrior angel security guard doorman of the Garden of Eden. Those are keruvim, right? So they're mighty warrior angels. How did they become associated with these little cute babies like that we talk about on Valentine's Day? That's a cherub. How did that happen? Rabbi Abahu said, so what is a cherub? What is a keruv? Rabbi Abahu said, like a baby. Keravia. Ke, like Ravia. For in Babylonia, they call a baby Ravia. Right? So it's just like an accident of idiom of the language being spoken in Babylonia that sounds similar to Kuruv, that they come out with this baby face. And Rav Papa said to Abaye, however, if that is so, what is the meaning of that which is written? The first face was the face of the cherub, and the second face was the face of a man, and the third the face of a lion, and the fourth the face of an eagle. So if the face of a cherub is the same as the face of a man, what is the difference between them? And he replied, the difference is that the face of a man is referring to a large face, whereas the face of a keruv means the small face of a baby. The Gemara asks another question. One verse states, each one of these angelic beings in Ezekiel's vision, or here in Isaiah's vision, Isaiah 6:2, each one had 6 wings. With 2 it covered its face, and with 2 it covered its feet, and with 2 it flew. And another verse states, and everyone had 4 faces, and every one of them had 4 wings. So which is it? Isaiah said they had 6 wings. Ezekiel said they have 4 wings. And the Gemara answers, this is not difficult, as here, when the verse states that they each had 6 wings, it is referring to the time when the temple is standing. While Isaiah was prophesying while the temple was standing. While there, where 4 wings are described, it is referring to the time when the temple is not standing, for it is as if the number of the wings of the animals were diminished so that they now have only 4. Now, obviously, Isaiah does talk about what he saw, right? When we sing Kadosh, 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 in the repetition of the Amida every day, morning and afternoon, right? We're reciting the vision of Isaiah. It's just that he doesn't go into it the kind of detail and the divine chariot, etc., that Ezekiel does. Isaiah more talks about he was able to witness sort of the company of angels singing to the Lord and give us a little taste of that upper realm. But Isaiah spent much more time talking about how we need to modify our behavior. The Gemara asks, which of the wings were diminished? If Isaiah said he had 6 wings, and then Ezekiel says the angels have 4 wings, and it's because the temple was destroyed that the angels lost some of their wings. So the Gemara asks, well, which of the wings were diminished? Which were taken away or shrunken? And Rav Hananel said that Rav said those with which they recite song. Right? Like it's almost like crickets, right? That they sing, the angels sing with their wings. And the proof is that it is written here, and with 2 it flew, And one called to the other and said, right, Kadosh, 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 Isaiah 6, 2 and 3. And it is written, will you set hata'if your eyes upon it? It is gone, Proverb 23, 5, implying that the flight of these wings had ceased. And the rabbis say that the wings they lost are those with which they covered their feet, as it is stated, and their feet were straight feet. In Ezekiel's vision, the angels didn't have feet. They seemed to have legs that were fused into a single leg. And they were flying all around, so they didn't need to walk anyway, right? But that's why when we stand for the Kedusha in our prayer, we keep our feet, sort of glued together, imitating the angels, as it were, as we call out, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. So now they're saying, yeah, because the wings that they lost are the ones that cover their feet. Now, that's Ezekiel 1:7. Now, if these wings had not been diminished, how would Ezekiel know what their feet looked like? Clearly, their feet were no longer covered. The Gemara rejects this. That's not a proof. Perhaps they were momentarily revealed, allowing him to see their feet. Because if you do not say so, that he saw them for a moment, and then with regard to the verse and the likeness of their faces, they had the face of a man, so too will you say that these, the wings covering their faces, were also diminished? Rather, it must be that they were revealed and he saw them, that the wings weren't taken away. They just parted their wings and he saw their faces. And likewise, they parted their wings and he saw their feet. But the Gemara refutes this. How can these cases be compared? Granted, it is logical that his face was revealed, as it is proper conduct for an angel to reveal his face before his master in heaven. And therefore, it is possible that they would have revealed their faces at certain times. But with regard to his feet, it is not proper conduct to reveal your feet before the Master, Holy One, blessed be He. Therefore, they must have lacked wings to cover their feet. The Gemara continues to address apparent contradictions. I'm almost done. If you have questions or comments, get them in. The Gemara continues to address apparent contradictions between verses concerning similar matters. One verse states, 1,000 thousands ministered to him, that's 1,000,000, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. That would be 100 million. And another verse states, is there any number to his troops? So the first was the millions or 100 million angels, Daniel 7:10. Is there any number to his troops? That's Job 25:3, implying that they are even more numerous than 10,000 times 10,000. And the Gemara answers, not difficult, la kasha. From here, when they are without number, the verse is referring to the time when the temple is standing. And there, the other verse is referring to the time when the temple is not standing. For it is as though the heavenly entourage were diminished by the destruction of the temple. Now, you might stop for a second and think, wait a minute. Souls come from a place of eternity in the upper realms, which are unimaginable, indescribable, can't be captured, the place of eternity. And, a human life in this world seems like an incandescent spark, and then we return to that place of eternity. And now they're saying, but when the temple was destroyed, when something happened in the physical world, it had so much impact in God's universe, as it were, that it caused, the heavenly host to be diminished. Billions of angels perhaps destroyed or ceased to exist or exiled from the presence of God. Like, why would whether or not there's a temple in this physical world have that kind of impact in the upper world? Answer, because this world matters. Because this world matters, right? This is the place where God's presence is hidden and where people have free will and a choice whether to do good or bad, whether to watch TV or study Torah, whether to curtail our lust for this or that sin and instead do God's will and, show compassion, give charity, take care of the helpless, etc. Anytime we do what is right and what is asked of us, what God wants from us, it has major impact in those upper worlds. Because this world, as it were, is like this place of pressure, right? Where everything happens so quickly and so irrevocably. Time only moves forward. It doesn't move forward and back. It only moves forward. Every moment, every opportunity exists only once. And the impact of that is not only forever in this world, but has major ramifications in the upper world. It is taught in a Baraisa. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, in the name of Abba Yosef ben Dosai, 1,000 thousands ministered to him. This is referring to the number of angels in a single troop. But with regard to the number of his troops, it can be said, and to his troops, there is no number. And Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba said there is no contradiction, since with regard to the phrase 1,000 thousands minister to him, the pronoun him can be literally translated as it, referring not to those who serve God himself, but to those who administer to the river Dinur. As it is stated, a fiery Dinur, a fiery river, issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands minister to it, and a myriad myriads stand before it. Another way to read Daniel 7:10. The ministers of God, however, are indeed too numerous to count. And what is this river? This fiery river that issues from before the presence of God? We'll pick it up there tomorrow with God's help. What a section, what a sequence of teachings and pages we're involved in now. Wow. Okay, let's see if there's some questions on Chagigah 13. Sharon, didn't Ezekiel purchase the land in his familial tribal area to show to the people his conviction that he foresaw a return to the land? Yeah, I've heard something like that. I don't remember the specifics of that story. But yeah, I mean, Ezekiel was trying to give chizuk, right? To give inspiration and encouragement to the people who thought that they had fallen so low. Right? The Babylonian exile, they didn't know there was going to be a second temple. They didn't know they were going to return to the land. They thought it was over, right? And out of the ashes of the second temple came rabbinic Judaism. The sages moved to Yavna. They started, talking about how Judaism could become something that would be permanent and could exist outside the framework of the temple. They didn't have that analog at the destruction of the first temple. The people were devastated. And Ezekiel was prophesying to them, no, there will be a return. There will be a return. He gave them a lot of encouragement. Sharon, isn't it also a prophet's job to speak truth to power? 100%. I am thinking of Elijah to Ahab, Nathan to David, Shmuel to Saul. They seem to be corrective to the kings, not addressing the people like the later prophets were, like Amos, Hosea, Isaiah, Jeremiah. I think that there's a mix of those. Right? Yes, as the king goes, so often so goes the nation. And so it is definitely the job of the prophets to speak truth to power. But it is also an aspect of the prophecy that it was captured, recorded, preserved, became part of our scriptural canon. And therefore the prophets, yes, they were speaking to the kings in their time or to the people in their time, but they're also speaking to us. Yosef, I've heard some teachings about, one from Rabbi Manis Friedman, and about a heavenly Torah or God looking into his plans when or before he created. I may be misinterpreting him, but if that is correct, do you think that would contradict not asking about what preceded creation? Well, good, Yosef, right? We have a teaching elsewhere that the Torah, right, preceded the creation of the world, of the physical world, by eons, right? God had the Torah in heaven, and it later became a blueprint for creating this world. It makes sense. You can imagine that God had an idea in his head of what the world would be like before he went and created it, right? And if we're talking about that kind of a thing, then aren't we sort of delving into the subjects of what happened before the creation, which is what they're saying we should not be doing, that is not permitted to us. I think what they're saying is that sort of inquiry permitted, and that's why it's part of the Torah. We talk the Talmud and we talk about it. and other kinds of inquiry which lead people, into themselves and mystical experience and trying to harness those forces to affect change in this world in a way that is not permitted. That is what is outside the scope of what is permitted. It's one way to approach that. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow for a key daf, Chagigah 14, and the very famous story of the four who entered paradise and what their fates were upon their return. All the best. Have a great night. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow with God's help.